Hey everybody, this is Becky with Grayson County Master Gardeners, and this is a continuation of our program on soil. So what we're going to be looking at in this presentation is composting. Composting is a great way to use up those scraps you've got from your kitchen and things you might have in your garden to help improve your soil. We talked about how to improve our clay soil we have here in Grayson County, and this is an easy way that you can do that. Really doesn't require a whole lot in the way of money. Using what you've got and preventing stuff going to landfill, which is always a good thing. Now, in this picture that you see right here, this is just a big pile of all kinds of stuff from a kitchen. Got pieces of onion, some potato, some salad parts, and mixed with a little bit of soil too, and a pitchfork to turn it all over with. So just as easy as this. And we're going to look at some different things that you can do to help with the composting. All right, what is it and why? Well, composting is the process of combining organic waste from plants in proper ratios into piles, rows, or bins to accelerate their natural breakdown. It's literally just nature doing its thing. What you'd see out in the forest as the leaves fall from the trees and go to the ground, you know, they don't lay there forever. They compost and go back down into the soil. Now, why do we do this? Well, the good benefits of composting: it improves the soil quality and nutrition. We definitely want to get that good nutrition into our soil. Improved drainage and nutrient availability. This is great for us with our clay soils. Helps with water loss prevention and nutrient leaching, which helps for the sandy soils, because when we talked about the soil structure, we looked at sand and how it doesn't hold those nutrients. It falls right on through. And the composting will help sand hold on to those nutrients. And less waste going to the landfills. And that's always a good thing. Okay, different ways to compost. Well, there are some different options for you to do. You've got the traditional compost piles, which we'll get into and looking at that. And that's what you can do in your backyard. It can be done on a large scale, a small scale. You can spend lots of money or do it definitely on the cheap. Vermicompost, this is with worms, and this is really quite a fascinating thing that you can do. Worm castings, that's the worm poo, is one of the most wonderful things that you can put into your garden. It's just like adding gold. So great way that you can compost using worms. You can also put directly into your garden. And I've heard my Professor Ashley say, you know, this is the cheap, easy way to do it. If you don't want to spend a lot of time make a composting pile, just go out into your garden, you know, make a little hole, chop with a shovel, poke that leftover apple core down in there, bury it, and go on. And you can do that, getting little pockets all over your garden. Easy peasy, easy to do. All right, bokashi, and apologize if I mispronounced that, composting. This is meat, bones, and cooked foods. This is a process that's much more complex. You have to be careful in your traditional compost pile. We don't typically put meat, dairy, or oils. With the bokashi composting, you can do the meat, bones, and cooked foods. It's a process that pickles or ferments the food particles in a sealed anaerobic environment. Being sealed, this will eliminate the foul odors, which you definitely get with meat that's breaking down, and also keeps unwanted pests from getting into your composting process. This uses bacteria to destroy any pathogens in the meat. Okay? This is something you definitely want to research on doing and make sure that you are doing this in a safe manner. And there's lots of information out there, so just Google and you can find out. There are separate systems that you can use for pet waste, like if, cats, dogs, but you want to make sure that you don't use the compost coming from pet waste on root, stem, or leaf veggies. Nothing you're going to be eating. You would want to use that type of composting maybe on trees or shrubs, nothing that's going to be used for consumption. Landfills. There are some amazing landfills doing an incredible job. Denton, here real close to us in Denton, they're using a lot of different techniques within their landfill system. They are known around the world. There are people who come to do training at the Denton landfill to go back to their own countries to take some of these processes with them. They are capturing the methane gas and using that to create electricity to power nearby homes. It's amazing. They're actually producing electricity for hundreds of homes right there close to the landfill. They also are creating biofuel to run most of their city vehicles. They're making what's called dino dirt, and they're making that with the excrement from the waste management process. They're taking the sewer, human sewer, and what they do is they get that sludge, they heat it to kill the bacteria, they mix it with dirt, and they form that sludge into mounds. And they have all these piles and piles of mounds, really tall, big, huge mounds. Every 21 days, the mounds are turned and allowed time to cure. It takes about 2 to 3 months for this process to go through. Throughout the whole thing, they're testing to make sure, looking for dangerous bacteria that might be developing. After it has completely dried out, then they sell this as compost. And it can they create this all year long. So that's something kind of cool going on there in Denton using their landfill. Now, there's also really cool composting toilets. This is nothing new. They've been around since the 1960s. This unit that's on your slide is a unit designed by the S.M.A.R.T, and it uses a 3-chamber approach. In this, it has the composting, it has the bio-drum that mixes the waste and peat mix material. The drum is rotated periodically, and it provides oxygen, a controlled moisture, and maintains warmth. You need that warmth to help the breakdown process. Then everything moves to evaporating chamber. And in that chamber, the compost is kept moist with the excess liquid strained in the evaporation chamber. Heat and moving air is used to facilitate the evaporation. Then everything moves to the finishing drawer. And in this drawer, the compost is gradually dried until it has reached a finished stage and removed. This stage completes the composting and the sanitation process. So that's kind of a pretty cool process that's going on. I watched a video on YouTube about this family in Norway. They have a completely self-contained house. They have their house, and they enclosed it in a glass walls, like a dome. And so within this dome, they're recycling their water, all their water usage. They're using a composting toilet. They're able to grow fruits and vegetables. They had fruit trees growing, all kinds of food in this really unique house in a super, super cold climate. They did comment, though, that on their using their composting toilet, they're very careful that they only use that finished compost on non-food plants and trees outside of their home environment. So you might try to look for that on YouTube. Pretty cool. All right, composting basics. For your basic, compost in your backyard, what are you going to need? You need something that has easy access. You want to be able to get into it and make sure it's easy for you to get to. You don't want anything that's going to be, making it hard on your back. You need excessive bending. Also kind of, be friendly with your neighbors too. So if you're worried about odor, you don't want that right up next to the fence of your neighbors. Needs to be near a water supply too, because it's important to keep your compost pile moist. Shade or sun. Shade won't hurt, because if it's in constant sun, it will dry out, especially during our hot, dry summers. So some shade's okay. It won't hurt to have some shade there. Level ground kind of works the best. Good, to help to keep that moisture in there. You can put it on concrete. Concrete will get super, super hot. And also, it's best if you can put it on bare soil, because that allows the worms and organisms to be able to enter into your compost pile to get it all generating and doing what it needs to do. Container. What are you going to do that composting in? It works really, bigger is better in this aspect. A good size, a lot of people go by, is a 3 foot wide by 3 foot tall. That way you can have enough of a size for it to build up heat to aid in that decomposition process. Too small, it will not generate enough heat, and I have definitely found that out too. So size does help. Vented to provide oxygen and water access. Yes, it's got to be able to have oxygen to get that process going. And rain, if you can let rainwater come in. If it's closed off, it's something you're going to need to be able to add water to. Space to turn your pile. Yeah, you need to be able to get in so you can get in there with that pitchfork or a shovel and have some room to be able to turn it. Be cautious if you have wooden pallets or railroad ties. These are things that are treated with the chemicals, and you don't want chemicals to get into your compost that might be detrimental to your crops. Okay, Texas A&M AgriLife, the Water University, has put out information about this Berkeley method, also known as hot composting, the S.M.A.R.T composting method. Some different steps you need to keep in mind. So S for size, larger pile generates heat faster than a smaller pile. M for moisture, you need to keep it moist. You got to add water to it when you're turning it or adding to your pile. And how you know how much moisture to have. So if you took a handful and squeezed it, just a few little drops of water will drip out. You don't want it to be really mushy with water or dry, whereas it doesn't have any moisture in there. So moisture is important. Aeration, okay, needs that oxygen. Those microorganisms, they need that to help them break down to the materials. You will also helps to fix the browns and the greens together. And turning it often, that's a big key to help it complete the process a little faster. Ratios. Now, it can get kind of complex on knowing how many carbons and how many nitrogens to put in there, but just a really easy ratio to remember is 2 parts brown to 1 part green, and we'll be getting into what's brown and what's green. Temperature, a range of 135 degrees to 165 degrees is a good range to go by. Higher than 165 gets too hot, and it will kill all the decomposers, so then all the decomposing process kind of comes to a halt. And below that, nothing really happens. So that's kind of the sweet spot to kind of aim for. All right, how can you do this in your backyard? What's some different type of compost containers? Well, there's neat and orderly. Oh my, this is nice and pretty. Yeah, if you have the space and if you have the money, to buy these. 3 bins. So this is a staged process for the 3 bins. Now the first bin is the add to pile. This is where you'd start at. So as you're putting your compost, just toss it in the top. You can get in there with the shovel, the pitchfork to get it turned. When that one gets full, then you close it all. It's considered closed, and you go to the next bin, and you start adding to that one. Meanwhile, bin number 1, you leave it alone. Just let it do its thing, turn it occasionally, keep it moist. Then bin number 2, you're adding to it. Then when that one gets full, close it, consider it closed, and move to bin number 3 and start adding to that. Okay, then you can go back to that very first bin, and it should be finished, and then it's ready to start using into your garden. So the process is that you've got one that is finished, you're pulling from, one that is closed, is allowed to do its thing, and one that you're adding to pile. And these will rotate. You'll rotate those 3. This depends if you have space. A lot of people don't have that much space to be able to do for their composting. Another way, if you want to really do it and you don't worry about what it looks like. Just a big old messy pile. Just pile it up. You can put your grass clippings in there, leaves. If you want to put a funny little sign on there, you can, and just let it do its thing. Leave it alone. You can spend some money. There's lots of composting bins that you can purchase at nurseries. You can also look for them online. Amazon has quite a variety of them. There are containers on stands. Some of them will turn vertically or horizontally. We have 1-door, 2-door. These are pretty easy to use. My father has one very similar to this one. It has a 2-door bins. It slides open. You can put your stuff in there, and then you don't have to use a shovel to turn it. You literally just close the doors, and the whole thing spins. And so it'll mix it up for you. When you're ready to empty, open those doors, turn it so that it falls right out. Super, super easy to use. You can just use some wire. It doesn't have to be anything expensive. This is your backyard. You do what you want to do. And you can make it real cheap just using some wire. Or there are some really amazing different ideas you can do too. This is called a keyhole garden. And in a keyhole garden, the concept is that you work kind of in almost a circle. So at the very center is where you drop in your compost. And they've made kind of like a picket fence center, and you would drop in your compost things right in there at the very top. Now around it, where you see all the little dots, that's plants, and they've got their soil and their plants are growing. Now the concept is that when you drop in your composting in the center, add your water, those nutrients are going to flow down through the center to the plants that are out on the edges. So I haven't got to build one of these. I just think this looks something really cool, and I have read a lot of people have a lot of success with this. It'd be something fun to try. Okay, now we're going to get into the browns and the greens. What do you put into your compost pile? All right, browns are going to things that have carbon, and in the carbon, lots of things. You can kind of think brown. Tends to go brown bags, dried landscape waste, fall leaves when they're brown, crunchy in the fall, sawdust, straw, wood chips. Now additionally, over there on the left, got some more things listed there for you too. Pine needles, paper, newspaper, wood, cardboard, eggshells, fireplace ashes, dryer lint, peanut shells, natural fibers like cotton, linen, and wool. All of those are considered to be in the carbon category because they contain carbon, and that's needed for the process. On the newspaper, I've been told that in the United States that our newspaper, the ink they're using is safe for us to be able to use, because I've heard people kind of express concern about that. Magazines, you wouldn't want to use something that has a glossy finish to it, or even like cardboard, if you think of it as covered in kind of a waxy. You want to keep things that would be more of a natural feel to it. All right, greens, this has the nitrogen, and that's a big part of the process too. For nitrogen, that's going to come from, a lot of things that are leftovers from when we're cooking. Alfalfa meal, coffee grinds, definitely. That coffee filter would be a brown, but the coffee grinds are going to be in green. Got crushed eggshell, hair, surprisingly, fresh landscape waste, like when you cut the grass, okay? Fruits and vegetables, when you're chopping onions and you have part of the onion left over, this would count. Top to the tomato would count. Potatoes would count. Tea bags. The paper that on the outside would be a brown, but the tea leaves inside would be a green. Additionally, to the greens, you got flowers, table scraps, seaweed, fresh leaves, fresh grass clippings, bread and grains, and burr falls into the greens too. Easy to remember, 2 carbon to 1 nitrogen. So that's going to be your ratio Pretty easy way to remember that. There are some no-nos. There are some things that we definitely don't want to put into our traditional compost piles. Fish, meat, bones, dairy. Don't want to use those. Diseased plants. You know, if you have a tomato plant that's died, it has some kind of disease, you don't want to put that in there because you wouldn't want to run the risk of whatever damage that tomato plant surviving in the compost pile to affect plants you might put on into your garden. No poo from people or meat-eating animals. We don't want to use that. So cats and dogs can't use that unless you're using that special separate composting pile. Other things in the no-no section: fats and oils, seafood scraps, metals, glass, treated or painted wood, or poisonous plants. And all that pretty much makes sense. Okay, now caring for your compost pile. How do you get this all to work together? Now your goal is for the temperature to approach 140, 160 degrees at the center of the pile. They make a really long thermometer that you can use to kind of poke down there to monitor your temperature to see this. Above 160 will kill microbes. So that's why, you know, rotating that composting pile, keeping it moist, and making sure it has airflow will help control your temperature. And turn the pile to release heat. It does get hot. It does really get hot. And I've heard of people telling that things actually catching on fire too. It's like, wow. So I'm monitoring it. Definitely. If it gets too hot, spread it out. You know, separate everything for a little bit. Aeration. You turn that pile regularly. Keep it going. And to increase your decomposition, you may have to add some more nitrogen materials if nothing's happening. And I've had that before. I've had too many leaves in there, dried leaves, which were in the browns. And so when I added more nitrogen stuff, you know, leftover lettuce, things that we were cooking in the kitchen, squash, tomatoes, then that really seemed to help get it going again. Turn it frequently. Also, you can chop up your items into smaller sizes. If you're putting, you know, watermelon rinds in there, you know, chop them up into a little bit smaller pieces. For the paper, if you're putting newspaper in there, shredding it into its still smaller sizes will help it compost a lot easier. When is your compost finished? How will you know? You'll know it has a dark brown color, crumbly and loose, humus-like, has an earthy smell. It'll smell good. You know, it's not going to smell all rotten, yucky. And you can also tell when you look at it and you don't see the feedstock, you don't see pieces of tomato in there, you don't see a big piece of newspaper. It's all broken down. Okay? The pile's going to shrink. It's a lot smaller. It's about 1/3 of its original size. How long does this take? Well, it depends. Depends on the size of your pile. Depends on the weather conditions. You know, if it's really hot or if it's really cold. It's going to be faster in the summer. Temperature of the pile, the kind of ingredients that you put in. And in our area, winter, you know, definitely. A big pile in the winter months will take about 3 months to break down. Summer in our area can be a lot faster, definitely due to the heat. Could be even 2 to 3 weeks. Troubleshooting. You know, sometimes problems pop up. And this gives you kind of a good list that you can look at. This is from Texas A&M AgriLife. Symptoms: if it's wet and smells bad. Oh yeah, I definitely have had that. Well, but the problems are not enough air, too much nitrogen, and it might be that you need to go back and add some more browns. Get some browns in there, some newspaper, some leaves, some old dried leaves. Okay? Or it could be too wet. Now, a good way to solve that solution: turn the pile. You can add some straw or wood chips to improve your drainage. Another symptom: it doesn't heat up. It's not getting hot. Pile too small or too dry, and I've encountered both of those. Yes. A solution: make the pile bigger. Add water when you're turning it. Another symptom is damp but will not heat up. Okay, may not have enough nitrogen in there. So you're going to add the nitrogen. You're going to need some green grass clippings, some food scraps, some coffee grounds. Another problem, attracting animals. Oh my goodness, yeah, we don't want the coons rustling through there. Food scraps not covered well, so maybe you need to get a little bit more covered up in there. A solution, enclose the pile in a 1/4 inch hardware cloth cover or food with brown materials, wood chips or leaves. Get something that's covering it. Okay. Good thing to do in the fall is collect some leaves either from your own yard or from your neighbor's yard, and then you'll have those kind of set back to the side in some bags, and you can add them in. It's really easy to add those in here. Be a little bit more careful with the wood chips. Wood chips can burn nitrogen really hot. You wouldn't want to use really heavy on wood chips, and sawdust is really bad on burning up nitrogen. It can get really, really hot, get your pile too hot. So go easy on wood chips and go easy on the sawdust. Leaves, dried leaves, great. All right, well that takes care of us for our composting, and we'll be looking at in our next video, famous master naturalist.